We often think of faith in terms of my relationship with God. But faith is a relay race, according to St. Paul. It is meant to be handed on before we finish the race in death. Death is not a topic that we like to think about, and I'm sure most of us are in agreement with that popular country song that says, "Everyone wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to go now." I get that. But we are not going to go later either if we don't get prepared now. In our second reading, St. Paul is handing on the faith to Timothy as he faces the end of his life, for his trial and martyrdom are imminent. His letter helps us reflect on our own faith lives and serves as a checklist on whether we are ready for death. Paul said that he was being poured out like a libation. In Judaism, a libation was a cup of wine that was poured out on the altar of sacrifice. Paul was reflecting on the sacrifices in his life that he made to spread the faith. Paul gave up being a very successful rabbi, and also many friends, in order to follow Christ. What have we sacrificed? When we reflect on our life, do we see that most of our energies are directed at Christ, or something less important? There is still time to refocus. Paul speaks of his departure being at hand. This is not a depressing thought, but rather the word that he uses means to untie ropes or lines that have held a tent in place. After all, Paul told the Corinthians, "We know that if our earthly dwelling, a tent, should be destroyed, we have a building from God, a dwelling not made with hands, eternal in heaven." We have to remember that this life is temporary. We are like pilgrims on a journey. Death is such a finality, but is not meant to be. Paul's use of the word departure can also mean unmooring the lines of a ship. We are meant to set sail from this life at some point. Paul wants us to hold the image of happy passengers waving goodbye and anticipating their destination. Then Paul uses analogies from Greek sporting events. I have competed well. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. In other words, can we say with St. Paul that we did our best? We fulfilled the purpose for which we were put here. We never gave up, and we handed on the baton of faith. In the Greek Olympics, the athletes swore an oath before the gods that they had trained and disciplined their bodies for at least 10 months in order to compete in the games. Can we say as much in the spiritual life? Have we prayed on a regular basis, continued to deepen our understanding of the faith, and fulfilled the obligations we have to worship God at Mass and receive His divine life in the sacraments? If faith is like a race, then we should be able to point to when we began the race. That is, when Jesus first chose us. We can reflect on when the race of faith was difficult, and we thought that we could not go on, until, by the grace of God, we caught a second wind. Perhaps a prayer was answered, a miracle was sent, or a person entered our life to help. We all like to win and be recognized, and Paul was no different. He said that a crown of righteousness awaits him. Winners in the Olympics used to receive garland or a victory wreath. And Paul is saying that if we cross the finish line by remaining faithful to Christ, we will reside in the winner's circle with all the saints. We have a lot of images of what heaven looks like, but the one that fits Paul's understanding the best is being a place of rest after heroic accomplishment. St. Paul wants us to be prepared, for the goal of this life is eternal life. Paul wrote, "Run so as to win." Every athlete exercises discipline in every way. We will not cross the finish line without discipline and sacrifice. There are also other runners in this race that depend on what we hand on to them. Again, Paul wrote, "For I received from the Lord what I also handed on to you." The reason we fear death, said Venerable Archbishop Fulton Sheen, is because we are not prepared for it. Death is often disguised by morticians, he said. They would almost make you believe there was happiness in every box. But a happy death, he said, is a masterpiece, and no masterpiece was ever perfected in a day.